بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه الطاهرين ما دام ما في السماوات والأرضين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم إنا نسألك علما ينفعنا يرفعنا اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وعملا متقبلا وشفاء من كل داء وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we thank and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His many blessings that He has bestowed upon us. And we beseech Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in those blessings. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessing of Islam wa kafa bi an ni'mah, and sufficient it is as a blessing. And we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for making us from amongst the followers of His beloved messenger, our liege Lord and Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And we are reminded of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam in terms of the subject matter that we are dealing with, and that is a rather exhaustive list of the qualities that we should free ourselves of. And what will follow probably in next week's lesson would be a fairly exhaustive list of the qualities that we need to embellish ourselves with. And this basically amounts to what our character is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. There's a character is something which our scholars talk about and they discuss to a degree of length. Perhaps I can attempt an explanation thereof. So character is something which is classified as either good or bad. The word character in and of itself, it's a neutral term, because a person can have good character, in other words a good makeup, or alternatively a person could have bad character, in other words a bad makeup. So character really is a person's makeup. So certain scholars, they liken it to a mold. If you have a particular mold, whatever you put in that mold is going to take the form of that mold. So a person's character is like that mold. Whatever you put into the mold, you're going to get out. So a person behaves in a particular way because his character is in a particular way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So the idea behind ridding ourselves of lesser qualities and embellishing ourselves with good qualities, it's really an attempt to change that mold. I was thinking of an example. Maybe we can think about it as an operating system. And we know we have different operating systems. If you look at a phone, for example, you have an Android phone, it's a particular operating system. And therefore that phone operates in a particular manner because it's based on a particular operating system. Another phone, a non-Android phone, will operate in a different manner because it's based on a different operating system. So when we look at different people, we find that different people behave differently. Why? Because they have different operating systems. In other words, they have different character. And maybe to make us understand, like you can, if you have an Android phone that's not working for you, then go for a non-Android phone which is a different operating system that might work for you. So if your current character is not working for you, you can change your character. And this is basically the idea of us discussing what we are discussing. We can work on our character. We can improve our character. We can rid ourselves of the lesser qualities and embellish ourselves with the higher qualities. And I think discussions like these, I don't know how it comes across, if it comes across very philosophical or something, but it appears to me to be quite simple, though sometimes the most simplest of things are the most difficult to explain. But I think perhaps maybe in the example of the operating systems, your character is your operating system. Whatever you put into there, that's going to be put out. It's like the mold. And we find the Prophet ﷺ had the best of characters. In other words, he had the best of molds. So when we talk about his character, we actually want to mold our characters and personalities according to his mold. In other words, we want to reconfigure, restructure our operating system, our internal operating system, like his operating system was structured. So for example, his character was the Quran. What does it mean? Whatever Quran commands, you'd find you'd fulfill. Whatever Quran prohibits, you stay. Whatever praiseworthy characters are found in the Quran is found in him. Whatever, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whatever lowly characters, traits are found in the Quran is not to be found within him. So what was his operating system like? If somebody said something to anger him, then he wouldn't respond immediately. Though an immediate response, it's almost natural. It's almost natural. Somebody angers you, and then you respond by you respond to the incentive. So the incentive is to get angry, to the prod. So the prod is there for you to get angry. So it's almost natural that you respond to the prodding. But it takes a different operating system to, when somebody prods you to become angry, to not immediately become angry, to buy your freedom. And your freedom lies in between that space from the time the person prods you up until your response. Because if the person prods you and they know you're going to become angry, and some people do that, they know this is going to tick you off, so they do it intentionally. But if they do what normally ticks you off, but they don't know you come to the Tuesday night class, so you're in the process of changing your operating system, so they can prod you, but you're not going to respond because you decide, I'm going to buy my freedom now. This one quality of the Prophet, and so if they can become part of your operating system. So I mean, if you have a car, no 200 very quick, but that's good on the road. But when it comes to your person, you actually have to have a car that's slow on the takeoff when it comes to bad things. You don't just respond like that. I came across a unique story along those lines, because we're talking about the negative qualities. So if these negative qualities are part of our operating system, it's like a computer. If we don't have an antivirus, what's going to happen? All of the viruses are going to contaminate all of your files, and your operating system is going to crash. So this list here is of viruses that is contained within your operating system, and if you and I don't have antivirus software, then those viruses are going to corrupt all of our files. In other words, everything that we do. So one of those qualities I came across, the whole idea of خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ عَجُولًا, man is hasty. And this is it's a human condition. We find the Prophet ﷺ in the incident of the trial of Aisha, I came across it just last night, that they accused her, and she's the mother of the believers, and she was the wife of the Prophet ﷺ and chaste. As chaste and chaste can be, examples can be had of her in terms of chastity. So the Prophet ﷺ, he's the husband of a lady who is accused of infidelity. So normally what would you and I do? We would respond immediately. The Quranic response comes a month later. It's a month. And the Prophet ﷺ, he has forbearance. He's not hasty to make a decision. So it's his operating system, his character, that actually allows him not to respond immediately. And like that, we're going to find many other qualities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq that we're able to rid ourselves of the viruses, what we refer to as the viruses, and embellish ourselves with the proper operating systems. Now, it's interesting, they say that why would you go for a non-Android phone? And I'm just employing the metaphor, only for the metaphor purpose. I'm not interested in the actual example. So, Alisa, why would you go for an iPhone as opposed to an Android phone? Generally, I mean, what's out there in the market, they tell you, it's a marketing, let's call it just a marketing, so that we can establish objectivity in terms of the discussion. So why would a person tell you to purchase an iPhone as opposed to an Android phone? The features, yes, but other than the features, they tell you Android is subject to all viruses, whereas the operating system of the iPhone is made such that it's immune to viruses. So if you use it as an example, then the character of the Prophet ﷺ was immune to viruses. Like his operating system was immune because he was infallible. And therefore he becomes an ultimate example for us. Yes, all the features and all of those things is 100%. But people generally tell you that you don't have to, because you don't upload virus software, antivirus software onto a MacBook or iPhone, whatever the case may be. That's the way they claim the operating systems to be. So in terms of character, what we wanting to talk about, if you have an ultimate operating system that has its own antivirus, it would be the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we continue with that particular list, and I found that the Jama'ah, when we were discussing before, were quite intrigued by this rather exhaustive list of different types of qualities that we should be free of. So what does the author talk about? I can't remember exactly where we stopped, but we'll continue with ta. So it's in alphabetical order. What tajassus means, referring to spying. So wala tajassasu, don't spy on one another. It's not a good quality. I'm sure you know of the incident of Umar radiallahu anhu, where he wasn't spying, but it could be interpreted as akin to spying. That the person was drinking within his home, and then Umar happened upon him. He was in his home, so he was wrong for drinking, but he was drinking within the confine of his home. So he took Umar to task in that particular regard. This is something you shouldn't have known, and what you don't know don't hurt in this particular instance. Not that one justifies the wrongdoing, but if you're going to look for something wrong, you're going to find something wrong. And sometimes the wrong that you're going to find, the harm is going to return to you, as opposed to the next person. So وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا, don't spy on one another. Don't look out for the faults of one another. وَالتَّبْذِيرِ, interesting. Remember, the only order here is the order of alphabetical order. So everything begins with a ta now. So tabdhir would refer to wasteful spending. This is considered to be a spiritual ailment. Tabdhir, wasting. إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا إِخْوَانَ الشَّيَاطِينَ. Those who waste are considered to be the brothers of the devil. The interesting statement of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He said that I dislike to spend in a day what I would otherwise spend in a month. It reminds you of the December holidays. Well, it's important to think about. In other than December, you wouldn't have spent that amount of money in a month, but you're spending it in a day. It could very well be interpreted as wasting money. وَالتَّبْذِيرِ وَالتَّعَمُّقِ. We will come across this quality later, but ta'ammuk is delving very deep in everything. It reminds me of certain things you just need a functional knowledge of it. But for you require an in-depth knowledge of everything. It's impractical. You just need to know the functionality of certain things you don't even have to know. Like, for example, a car. You simply have to know that if my car breaks down, I must go to the mechanic. You don't have to do a 5-year course on mechanics. You don't have to delve in everything. Maybe, I don't know how befitting it is, but the book of Dale Carnegie, in this particular regard, he has this thing of, you need a functional knowledge of most things. You don't need an in-depth knowledge of everything. For certain things, you don't even need to know how it operates. You just need to know why am I using it? Why do I need it? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. So ta'ammuk. وَالتَّمَلُّقِ. Here we have an interesting one, and I wrote the meaning now. وَالتَّمَلُّقِ refers to a person saying something with his tongue, but it's not contained within his heart. So in other words, it's a form of hypocrisy. To say something with your heart, but not with your it's not contained within your. You say something with your tongue, but it's not contained within your heart. So at-tamalluk. The next one, وَالتَّذَلُّ لِلْأَغْنِيَاءِ لِغِنَاهُمْ. This is a very interesting point which is raised over here, and it puts into perspective wealth from an Islamic perspective. It puts into perspective wealth from an Islamic perspective. What is wealth? Is wealth a mark of excellence? If one person has more money than another person, does that mean that the person with more money is better than the person with less money? No. So much so that even if a person has wealth is not considered, and it's not necessarily telling of the favor of Allah upon you. Allah, you're adopting a vice. It could very well be that despite the fact that you're adopting a vice, that nothing wrong happens to you. It's just Allah SWT leading you on. So the higher you go up, the harder you fall. So wealth is not within an Islamic paradigm is not a measure of good and bad within an Islamic paradigm. Absolutely not. Maybe to give a few examples in that. So the spiritual ailment meant here is to humble oneself, lil aghniya, for rich people due to their richness. If a rich person comes in, and I honor the rich person by taking a chair and putting it up there, but the rich person also happens to be elderly. If I'm honoring because of his elderly status, then I'm going to get reward for that. But if I'm honoring because he has money, then I'm not going to get reward for that. So humbling yourself in front of a rich person simply because the person is rich, that is considered to be a spiritual ailment. Maybe we can do a few examples. One example that comes to mind. I don't have a few. This whole thing, and the wording what the scholars use is also quite unique. They call it ishraq fil ibadah. You're worshipping Allah, but then you in an act of worship, but you continue in the act of worship for other than Allah. And it's legitimate in certain instances. It happens. So you're praying, the Imam is praying. So now he bows. He doesn't prostrate, he bows. So anybody who catches the Imam whilst he's bowing for the duration of what it takes to say one Subhanallah, then he has got the unit of prayer. We're fine with that. So what happens now is I'm bowing. So who am I bowing for? For Allah. But now I hear somebody walking and I'm on the verge of standing up. But then I say, let me tarry for a bit longer in order for that person to get one Subhanallah, and then he gets the unit of prayer. So now am I doing it for Allah, or am I doing it for the person to catch the unit? I'm doing it for the person to catch the unit, and it's permissible. Is it? So I wait a little bit. Maybe you're praying at home and now your wife is studying a bit longer. So then you hold on a bit up until she's comfortably able to get you whilst you are bowing, and then she gets the unit of prayer. You with me? So who do you do it for? Allah or for the person? For the person, fine. So that's permissible. But now what if I'm bowing and I hear somebody come in? And I know for a fact that this person the person who's coming in is a person of wealth. And I'm now waiting for him to catch a unit of prayer. Why? Because of his wealth. It's not permissible. So putting a person on a pedestal, this is axiomatically known within Quran in the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Honoring a person due to his wealth is not a legitimate reason for honoring a person within an Islamic paradigm. And therefore a spiritual ailment is when you lower yourself simply because the person is rich. If a person is generous, I'm trying to say a person is generous, and because of the quality in the person, you honor the person for that's a different thing altogether. Why? Because you're honoring a quality. And there's two persons. لا حسد إلا في اثنتين. There's no enmity except in two things. رجل آتاه الله الملك فينفقه آناء الليل وآناء النهار. Allah has granted him wealth. So now you're not jealous of the person because of his wealth, but because of the fact that he spends that wealth throughout the day and throughout the evening. So to honor a person due to his wealth is considered to be a spiritual ailment. Because who has granted him that wealth? Allah SWT has granted him. If you want the wealth, ask Allah for the wealth. Don't belittle yourself in front of a person that has wealth. It's considered to be a spiritual ailment. May Allah protect us. May Allah SWT grant us sincerity. And that we respect people for the measures of respect which Allah SWT has put there. Like an elderly person. An elderly person must be respected in Islam. And within an Islamic paradigm, the older a person gets, the more is respected. The older a person gets, the more is respected. Why do you respect a person? For knowledge. Leadership. Prophet ﷺ says, Qumu li sayyidikum. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh it was, after the Battle of the Trench, when he had to be carried and he was going to pass judgment on Banu Qurayza. So the Prophet said to his companions, stand, this is a form of honoring, stand. Out of love for somebody, the Prophet used to stand when his daughter Fatima would come. He used to stand up to greet her out of love and honoring. But if it's out of wealth, for wealth purposes, no. We shouldn't. No. What ta'yir, another, so we continue with the ta. I'm going to go quickly because I was hoping that we can finish the whole alphabet today. What tahqir, looking down on somebody. Always looking down on everybody. Considering somebody insignificant. Shouldn't be. How does the narration go? كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ إِثْمًا أَن يَحْتَقِرَ أَخَاهُ مُسْلِمٍ. It's sufficient for a person to be, I forget exactly the wording, it's either a sin or in terms of evil. And that's a very heavy word. It's sufficient for a person to be labeled as evil that he looks down on his Muslim brother. So, and Imam Nawawi Rahman mentions this particularly when he come in a gathering. In a gathering, you know, people display themselves, you see who people are. And if somebody is doing wrong, the person is doing wrong. But what happens is, as a result of that, you look down on the person. That person is falling in your estimate. So Imam Nawawi particularly, he talks about when you go for Hajj and Umrah, how easy is not. You know, you come, one day we stand in front of the Kaaba, and so the Hajj al-Aswad is to my left, and the Multazam is in front of me. So an Arab gentleman comes to me, and he says to me, where's the black stone? So where's the black stone? Black stone is right in front of us. So I said to him that the black stone is right in front of us. So he turns around and he's going to the black stone. So I stopped him, I said to him, look, it is recommended to kiss the black stone, but to cause harm to others in the process of doing so, it's wrong. So don't do something recommended on the expense of doing something which is completely wrong. So he said to me, shukran, and he moved on. If I were to think to myself, look at this person and think the worst of him, that is the problem. Not that you're condoning it, but it's, people say in that particular context, before that person falls in your estimation, you've already fallen in the estimate of Allah. So we must be careful. We must have tarahum, have mercy upon the person. If only you had spent some time learning about this, it should have been good for you. To lament it, that's something else. But you know, to look down on the person, that's something else altogether. So tahqir. Wa tazkiyatun nafs, a spiritual ailment. Normally we say tazkiyatun nafs, purification of the soul. What does it mean in this context? It means that you consider yourself to be purified. You know, I think in Afrikaans they have like a few expressions that talk to this particular point. So I don't know how it goes. It's not the most savory expressions. Perhaps after the class we can. I'm sure Ali Sab knows all about it, but he just doesn't want to say now. وَتَزْكِيَةُ النَّفْسِ. So Allah SWT talks in the Quran, فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Exactly, this wording here is exactly from the Quran. فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. So much so that we spoke about it, sometimes the Prophet would change the name because the name was telling of spiritual excellence. Barra, for example, which means to be very good. Who's given you that station? That you've named yourself very good. So the Prophet changed some of the names to more neutral names, because even on that level we shouldn't be considering ourselves as ripe, because when you're ripe you rot, and if you consider yourself green and then you grow. So these are the rules. وَالتَّبَخْتُرُ, pride. وَالتَّكَلُّفُ, everything you do is affected. So yes, for example, when you read Quran, you must read with proper pronunciation. But if your pronunciation is affected, everything you do is affected. You know, when you sit, okay, me sometimes I try to sit up straight, but everything about you is very affected. So that's considered to be a spiritual ailment. Be normal. We say many times somebody, is behaving very prim and proper. Then we tell the person, you can be normal. So normalcy is a good thing. And too much of affectedness and feigning things in the way that we conduct ourselves, it's considered a spiritual ailment as well. وَالتَّعَرُّض لِلتُّهَمِ, presenting yourself to slander. So in other words, you put yourself in a position where people are going to say this, that and the other about you. You're wanting to buy a coffee, there's a coffee stand here, but now there's a coffee and there's a bar. So you walk into the bar to get your coffee. You're traveling and you just came back from a travel, but now it's in the day, it's in Ramadan, and then you're eating, nobody knows. And then when people say that, you weren't fasting, and then you start questioning people in terms of their bad thought. But you were guilty of presenting yourself, and sometimes people present themselves in a situation that they know people are going to say negative, only to turn around to tell them, you see, why are you thinking bad about me? That shouldn't be. So, one shouldn't present themselves. Some people, they like to, especially with good people, they like to put traps. And then the good person falls into the traps and they say, you see, we shouldn't do that. وَالتَّكَلُّمْ بِالْمَنْهِ, to speak about things which are prohibited. So it also talks about sometimes, we have days of ignorance and then we speak about it and reminisce about it. One person shouldn't speak about that. وَالتَّشَدُّقْ, tashadduq is a unique word also, and that is for people, initially I thought it meant to be verbose, but it's basically for a person to prattle and chattel on and on and on. Person can't, stop talking, talk all the time, tashadduq. Or it can also mean to a person that they talk, but they verbose is when you use a high word but at the wrong time. It's unnecessary for you to use those high words. So, and verbosity is not like a good thing in terms of speech. You must use the right word at the right time, but you must also come across very clearly, so people understand what you're saying. So the unnecessary usage of, what do we call it? Jawbreakers. The unnecessary usage of jawbreakers is not a good thing. It's a bad thing. Now, normally it's used to impress people. The right word at the right time, and people don't know that word, then that's perhaps maybe not your problem, their problem. But to unnecessarily use convoluted language, is considered to be a spiritual ailment. وَتَضْيِيءُ الْوَقْتِ بِمَا لَا يَعْنِي, spending your time in that which has no meaning. Frivolous things, the time just go by. In other words, what do we call it? Procrastinating. From Dhuhr to Asr, if I ask you, what did you do? If you ask me, what did I do? I can't really give a record. I've just been wasting time. وَالتَّكْذِيبِ, belying people, considering people to be silly and stupid, excuse me for that word. وَالتَّنَابُزْ بِالْأَلْقَابِ, calling people names. But obviously, if the person takes an issue with the name, but if the person doesn't take an issue with the name, then it's okay to call him by a nickname. And some people, they known more by the nicknames than anything else. There was a person when we were studying, I mentioned to you before, but I always like to mention it again because it reminds me of the student days. They called him Burfi. Are you familiar with Burfi? Burfi you haven't had Burfi before? No, we must give you some Burfi. I consider you deprived for not having Burfi in your life. Ali Sahab, I was telling you, I went Sunday, they invited me to a Maulid in the Highlands, man. I tell you, the soji I had there, subhanallah. It's vied with that soji that you get from Durban also. I thought that, the soji you get in Durban, you won't get it anywhere else. Lo and behold, I came to Cape Town, and then in the heart of Highlands, you find soji that is actually vying for. So soji is one that you must have at least once in your lifetime. Soji you have. And then there's burfi. There's also another sweet meat. But you get different types of burfi. You can order from Durban also. They sell it in that, what's the name, and then you get sell it in a box, and you get a few types of burfi. But the plain ones is all the nicest ones. You get all different fancy ones, different colors and so forth, but the plain original burfi is very good. So this gentleman, his name was Burfi. Uncle Yusuf would know, and you've made good friends with him. and then inshallah maybe perhaps one day he'll bring you some burfi. No, but make sure you give him the proper burfi, no? Because you know he tastes the like the sorry excuse for burfi, and then he's wind of burfi, and then whose fault is it? It's your fault. And he thinks that he doesn't like burfi, but actually the burfi that he's renouncing is the sorry excuse for the burfi. These things like soji, burfi, you know what, even dal, you must have the right thing. Because you could very well have dal, and then you say, no, I don't like dal. But what you had was the sorry excuse for dal, not dal. So these are things you must be very careful about. Very careful about. So there was a gentleman, his name was Barfi, studied at the madrasa. I don't even know his name. So he became Hafiz Barfi. After 7 years he became Maulana Barfi. And still today, it would be difficult for me to get his name. His teacher said, must we tell the people to say? He said, look, I don't mind being called Barfi, that's the point. So if you give somebody a name and they don't mind the name, then it's not a problem. But if the person minds the name and they actually take offense thereby, then لا تنابزوا بالألقاب. والتعبيس, frowning all the time. تفريط, negligence. والتسويف في الأجل. Always when you ask somebody for something, they say, Inshallah, I'm going to do it. Tomorrow, next week, next month, and so forth. Tasweef is considered to be a spiritual ailment of postponing things all of the time. You don't get around to actually doing it. When are you going to declutter the garage, Ali Sab, for example? So inshallah. It doesn't come to fruition. You must put a date to it, commit to it, and do it. But everything, inshallah, is considered to be a spiritual ailment. If you think about these things, then والتمني المذموم والتخلق بزي الصالحين زورا. This is a unique one, and I'm sure we can speak at end on this one. والتخلق, dressing up, بزي الصالحين, with the dressing of the pious, زورا, but you actually an imposter. So you find some of our current, I'm talking about contemporary spiritual luminaries, they don't wear like the turban, because for them the turban, it represents a certain degree of piety. You with me? From that perspective, look, there's no question about, is it recommended to wear headgear? Yes, it is. The turban more so. And I use the term recommended very loosely. But wearing, what do they say about clothes? You are what you wear. You are what you wear. But now what's happening is, the person is wearing what he's not. So that's the whole thing. Tuduwas had this thing about you are what you wear. So, but this person is not that, but he's wearing that. He's wearing what he's not. So he gives a certain impression. That's the one. The other consideration which our scholars had was that, when you're wearing this type of, I mentioned before, that even if I'm looking now, normally it's not right for me to skip a red robot. But now, so what some scholars do is, when they want to skip the road robot, they just take off their turban, put on the passenger seat, skip the red robot, and then put it on. That's better than skipping the red robot with your turban on, or your kufiya on. Because you must have a difference for what this represents. And therefore they say it's also sometimes for many people a deterrent to wear certain type of clothing. Because if you weren't in that clothing, then you'd have actually gone into the place where you were not supposed to go into. So there's a lot of dynamics around clothing. But here to wear such clothing as an imposter. And perhaps it's important to think, because what happens sometimes, especially in the West, when you got the starter pack, I got the starter pack, so alhamdulillah, that's enough. I've reached the highest levels that this particular spiritual path has to hold. Why? Because I got the starter pack. No. May Allah SWT protect us. So that's an interesting one which will come and we will speak about it inshallah. وَتَنَاوُلِ الرُّخَصِ بِالتَّأْوِيلَاتِ. A person always opting for the concession in everything, always the shortcut. No. So there's nothing wrong with it, but it compromises on your servitude. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you to do something, always the shortcut. No. والتمني والتساهل في تدارك الغيرة والتساهل, being lax in rectifying an issue which has taken your pride, which is a type of pride which is driven by a protective jealousy. So for example, for a male person, somebody attacks the honor of his wife. He doesn't do anything about it. He says, I'm going to get him again. He's not going to get him again. Get him now. So it's considered to be a spiritual ailment. And many times that when something happens and you don't put it into it now, then what's going to happen is just going to get worse and worse and worse. So when ghira, which is like a protective jealousy, and it can sometimes happen, let's say somebody comes into the masjid, what is a protective, an example, a Bedouin comes in the mosque and he starts urinating in the back. What are the companions driven by? A protective jealousy. How can you do this? And it's wrong what he's doing. The Prophet ﷺ took them to task because look, we're going to reform him, but if you're going to, whilst he's still doing what is, just wait for him to finish, and then we're going to sort him out. But it didn't mean, the Prophet ﷺ didn't say, come on, be easy. So there's certain things, when you're not supposed to be easy and then you're easy, then it's a problem. Somebody takes onto the honor of yourself, the honor of your family, particularly the women folk, and then men must have this protective jealousy that they prepare to go to whatever lengths is required in order to protect those that they are responsible for. And the Sharia actually allows that. And there's no interest for a human being except that Islam allows it. So in other words, if Islam allows you to defend yourself to the death in terms of protecting the honor of your women folk, then it means that's in your interest. There's nothing, and a human being would just naturally do that. So negligence in that particular regard of giving a realization to one's protective jealousy, that is considered to be a spiritual ailment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Points like these, it gives us an idea of the spiritual doctors and what length they went to and how they looked at different qualities. Wallahu alam. We will continue. Wat-tahawwur is another one. Recklessness. You open the fridge like you want to and close like you want to. Pick up the pen. Automatically when you're reckless, then the chances of you meeting up in an accident on whatever level is just greater. You take the drill, you put it down there, leave it on, leave the plug on, leave the stove on, leave this. The process when you go sleep, he never left no fire on. And he warned against it. It's recklessness to leave the fire on. It's reckless to start your car in the road and leave the door open and go in to get something quickly and come out. So there's different forms of recklessness. And recklessness is a spiritual ailment. You must stop yourself from being reckless. And sometimes some of us just have a penchant to recklessness. And if we don't hold ourselves back, then we find that we meet up in accidents all the time. Sometimes because we're quick and we're reckless. Hastig is altyd vinnig, and like that. So it's quite unique that our scholars say that recklessness is considered to be a spiritual ailment. So if you're reckless, don't say, but that's just the way I do things. No, it must be remedied. Your operating system must change. In terms of, and part of your operating system that must change is, this is a virus. Recklessness is a virus in your operating system. Take it out. Hastiness is a virus in your operating system. Take it out. And etc. In that particular manner. وَالتَّدْبِيرِ لِلنَّفْسِ, always planning and plotting for yourself. وَالْجَهْلِ, ignorance is considered to be a spiritual ailment. وَجَهْلِ الْحَقِّ, refusing the truth. Argumentativeness. Everything is an argument for you. When somebody is just trying to have a conversation with you, but you turn it into an argument. Everything must be an argument. No. وَالْجَفَاءُ, very harsh, like unapproachable. A person just looks at your face and he knows what mood you're in. You don't want to talk. You come in the room, they look at your face and they move out. Jaffa, this shouldn't be like that. You should have a welcoming nature to yourself. Jaffa, this harshness shouldn't be. You come in the house, you don't talk to anybody. Go straight in your room, straight out, kitchen, eat, toilet, bedroom, nothing. Jaffa, no. There must be a round edge to who you are. Transgression, cowardice, avariceness, jealousy, stupidity. Stupidity is considered to be a spiritual ailment. Now, وحب الشهرة, love to be known. حب الشهرة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that. وحب الدنيا وحب الرياسة والجاه, loving the world, and you start, so now we're with ha now, loving the world, ha, حب الدنيا وحب الرياسة, loving leadership, والجاه, loving to have a standing, spreading faults of others, والحزن الدائم, always in a state of sadness, always down in the doldrums. Anybody look at you, then you induce pity from them. والحزن الدائم, no. والخديعة, deceiving others. والخبث, vileness. خيانة, treachery. خلف الوعد, going against your promise, spiritual ailment. والخيلاء, والدخول فيما لا يعني, entering into that which you have no concern. والذم, ذم is to rebuke. والذل, lowliness, baseness. والرياء, ostentation. والركون للأغيار, prisoner of your emotions. Whatever the emotive is, that you follow that emotive. You're unable to, if emotions like a stallion, you're unable to bridle that stallion, to put a rein on that stallion. When the stallion wants to buckle, then you buckle with it. No. وَرُؤْيَةُ الْفَضْلِ عَلَى الْأَقْرَانِ, considering yourself as more virtuous than your contemporaries. وَسُوءِ الظَّنِّ, bad thought. وَالسِّعَايَةُ, to betray others. Malicious joy at the misfortune of others. Gluttony. شِرْكُ الْخَفِي, in other words, ostentation. وَصُحْبَةُ الْأَشْرَارِ, finding yourself in the company of bad people is considered to be a spiritual. You might not be bad, but you enjoy spending time with bad people. وَالصَّلْفُ, bragging and boasting. طُولُ الْأَمَلِ, having never-ending hopes. طَمَعْ, avariceness. طَلَبُ الْعِوَضِ عَلَى الطَّاعَةِ, always seeking a recompense for your good deeds. وَالظُّلْمُ, oppression. عَجْلَةُ, hastiness. عُجْبُ, vanity. عداوة, making enemies of others في غير دين, for other than religious purposes. والغضب, becoming angry. والغفلة, unawareness. فسق, sin. الفرح المذموم, being happy in the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قسوة, hard-heartedness. قطع الرحم, severing family ties. كبر, pride. كفران النعمة, not being grateful for the blessing which Allah has bestowed upon you. والعشير, and the family that you have. They say wisdom is such that if you give a person, a wise person, a wife that is 1 out of 10, is appreciative of it and makes the best of it. A person who doesn't have wisdom, you give him a wife of 10 out of 10, he won't realize the blessing that he's in. No. So, كفران النعمة والعشير, not ingratitude towards blessings and ingratitude towards your family. No. That Allah has blessed you with. والكسل, laziness. كثرة النوم, sleeping all day. كثرة النوم, sleeping a lot. واللوم, always rebuking people. Flattery, calling each other names. Sitting with rich people simply because they're rich. You don't want to be seen with the rich people. Excessive joking. So to joke is good, light-hearted banter, but excessive joking is considered to be a spiritual ailment. والنفاق, hypocrisy. Evil intentions. Leaving off a Muslim without any valid cause. In other words, abandoning a Muslim. I'm not talking to you, I'm not going to talk to you. What's the reason? I don't feel like talking to you. So that's sort of valid. It's considered a spiritual ailment. Now, وَنِيَّةُ الْفَاسِدَةِ, bad intention. وَالْوُقُوفِ فِي الْأَرْضِ, getting into the honor of other people. وَالْوُقُوفِ فِي غَلَبَةِ الدِّينِ, فِي غَلَبَةِ الدَّيْنِ عفوا. This is quite interesting. Wuqu, falling into a lot of debt. So falling into a lot of debt, there must be causes for that. Shaykh Abdul Rauf used to say that when your output is more than your input, and then you're going to have a problem. So falling into a lot of debt, it's almost indicative of so many other spiritual ailments that you and I could potentially be having. Not necessarily. So debt, unnecessary debt would be an issue. Now, a spiritual ailment. Now, I think, وَالْيَأْسُ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ. And this is the last one because of وَالْيَأْسُ فِي الرَّحْمَةِ. Losing hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is considered a spiritual ailment. So in other words, having hope is of belief, and not having hope is not of belief. إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرِينَ. It's only a non-believing nation that loses hope in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah grant us the tawfiq. We came to the end, alhamdulillah, but we took up, I think, just about all of the time. But I think in reading through the exhaustive list of spiritual ailments, there's much benefit to be had. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq. When we come back next week, inshallah, we'll perhaps maybe start with Aqlani al-Liberaliyya, and then we can conclude with the. So if there's no questions, inshallah, then we conclude. Barakallahu feekum. Marhaba. What time is Isham?
24.
Oh, mashallah, mashallah. So we still have time. Bismillah, Sidi.
I think one of the points Manan was talking about was taking in like forward, right? So my question is in terms of, say for example, in terms of leadership, and you have to, you now like go forward and I say that I need, like, you can clearly see that there's a gap here, so you stand in. And not that you want to, but that's the situation. Or the second one is where they put you forward and say, right, okay, listen, you're gonna do, you didn't ask for that. So maybe it's some leadership. But
I think that those cases are very clearly elucidated in terms of Quran and the way of the Prophet ﷺ. That the one narration talks about that if leadership is thrust upon you, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless it. But if you seek out leadership, then that type of leadership is void of the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So leadership as such is not something which is sought out generally within an Islamic paradigm. So within a Western paradigm where you actually apply for a job and then you extol in terms of your CV and all your virtues, that to a certain degree is anti-Islamic from a certain perspective. So in the example that you mentioned where this leadership is thrust upon you, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless it and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept it from you. Then it's not thrust upon you, but like you're saying, there's a void. And if you're not going to fill that void, then somebody else is going to fill it. And they say like before the leader is appointed, then nobody wants to be the leader. But once the leader is appointed, then everybody wants to. But sometimes it can happen in a real sense that you have the qualifications. So then the story of Yusuf alayhi salam comes to mind. Yusuf alayhi salam, he said to the king, "Ij'alni ala khaza'in al-ard." That make me in charge of the treasures. In other words, of the storage. Ij'alni, the words are very clear. Yusuf alayhi salam, he sought it out. So there are incidences where you can actually seek out a position, and there won't be anything untoward about it. And then he explains, "Inni hafidun alim." I've got the knowledge, and I've got the hafid, I've got the capacity. So when it comes to positions, there's two things. You must have the integrity and you must have the capacity. And many times what happens within our Islamic circles and paradigms. The problem really is that the individuals, many times individuals in positions of leadership, it's not that they don't have integrity, they're good people, but they don't have capacity. And different roles require different capacities. Sometimes maybe comparatively speaking, the most simple roles would be if you're on the committee of a mosque. You have integrity, and the administrative functions may not be that involved. Unless maybe you're the treasurer, then it will come maybe a bit involved. But let's say you're managing, you're managing a waqf, an endowment, where monies need to be invested and things like that. And you basically need to make a decision. You need to have a certain competency, skills, and levels in order to manage that. So a member of a committee and a member of an asset management company, it's two different things. You need two different skill sets. So Yusuf alayhi salam, he came forward and said, make me the Minister of Economics. Do I have the competencies for that? Yes, I do. Integrity, and I have the skill sets for it. So if a person has that, and then he can put himself forward, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless it, inshallah. And this happens, and sometimes it's a big responsibility because, these places, you can see it depending where you are in life, and there's vacancies, and if you don't fill it, then it's going to be filled with the wrong people, and it's important then for you to actually step forward and take on that responsibility. Allah.
One of the things you said, and just triggered a thought in the discussion I had with my wife, and that when you give someone wedding gifts, there's a tendency that if the wedding is a wealthy family, you tend to give a higher value gift compared to someone who's a less from less value, you tend to give a lower value gift. It may be intentional, it may be subconscious. Maybe the thought is that you give a gift equivalent to the value that they're used to in their life. So, is there justification for that? Is there argument against it?
No, I think there's thank you for the question. The first thing that comes to mind is in terms of, so one is applying I would think in this particular instance, if I look at it, I can think about it in three ways. One is basically applying our logic. The other one is I can look at it from just a human behavior point of view, anthropologically, human behavior, and then from a revelatory law point of view. So from a revelatory law point of view, that's always normally our starting point. And a very similar incident happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So Aisha is reporting this particular narration. It says, أَنزِلُ النَّاسَ مَنَازِلَهُمْ, that place people on their placings. And what happened was that one person came and asked for something, and Aisha gave according to that person's standing. Another person came of a higher standing, and then Aisha gave much more. So she was questioning about this. She said, the Prophet ﷺ says, أَلْنْزِلُ النَّاسَ مَنَازِلَهُمْ, that place people upon their placings. So that would actually be good when you interact with a person in light of his standing. There's no prejudice in that particular regard. I think it's maybe not what they call, I don't know if they call it equality as opposed to being equal. Like you have two children, the one is a 5-year-old and the one is a 15-year-old. So you don't buy exactly the same that you buy, but you place the 15-year-old on his placing, the 5 on their placing, and accordingly you act. So it's about the complementary way of things. It's just here it appears to be almost like prejudice, but it's not prejudice. It's وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَهُمْ لِبَعْضٍ سُخْرِيًّا. Allah has placed people in certain standings and so forth, which is very interesting. And sometimes these standings need to be maintained as well, because you could maybe think you're doing something good, but it's not actually a good thing. For example, if in the Kenyan area, and this, I don't know if it's an issue or not, but you have a going rate in terms of domestic help. But what happens is you feel that you must give more. So you do actually give more, but what happens is that in the overall, it now becomes unaffordable for many to actually have a domestic. So as opposed to the macro benefit is actually compromised in that particular process. So there's nothing untoward about it. If a person looks down on somebody, and in that way they draw that particular distinction, then I would imagine that would be problematic. But if it's basically just placing people in terms of their placing, then there shouldn't necessarily be something wrong with it. Wallahu a'lam. Our Islam is also very pragmatic, but obviously maintaining the proper principles. Wallahu a'lam. Shall we conclude on? Seems like we have to wait for next week for Ali Sab to shoot from the hip. But I mean, not shoot from the hip, but you draw. And inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.